Now Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. First the male, or knowledge, or mind, then the female, or understanding, or heart. When the two come together, conception takes place, leading to the birth pains, forming the firstborn child or natural man in our being. As we've learned, all of this aligns with Nebuchadnezzar's dream, consisting of 7 body parts and 4 metals. Firstborn child of Adam and Eve is Cain. And like his father and mother, Cain is an actual person. It represents more than that. Here's what follows Genesis 4:1. Then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. Even though Cain is the firstborn, Abel, a keeper of sheep, is listed ahead of Cain, the tiller of the ground. Might a keeper of sheep or shepherd equate to our love for others, while a tiller of the ground or farmer typify our struggle with the self that gets in the way of this love? Is this not further emphasized by Cain's remark, am I my brother's keeper? Might this help explain the inward struggle all of us go through? In 1 Corinthians 15, there are 2 Adams, the first and last. The natural or living soul is first, while the spiritual or life-giving spirit is last. But how do we get from the first to the last? The Lord tells us in the following. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Here, Christ addresses sowing and reaping, bringing in a third component between the sowing and the reaping. What is it? It's death. So if Adam and Eve denote the natural man, then their fall in Genesis 3 reveals the next stage in the process leading to life, typified by the threefold process of the seed in John 12:24 as living, dying, and then life. In agreement, Jesus said this in Matthew 16:25. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. In alignment with John 12:24, Jesus says we must lose our life. Why? Because again, it's a necessary stage in the process of sowing and reaping. Death is not here by mistake, but through divine design. Now, let's define what is meant by death. After all, when Adam and Eve sinned, they did not physically pass from this planet. So what is pictured by their temptation and fall? The following shows us. For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Because the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, nor indeed can be. So then, those who are in the flesh cannot please God. Here we are, my friend, where 1 Corinthians 2:14 shows our innocence and ignorance regarding good and evil. Here we see our lack of spiritual awareness leading to a state of mind resisting God's law. What does Paul say is death? To be carnally minded. So we enter this world as natural beings or living souls, then fall into carnality or death, ultimately ending this earthly journey in life. Our threefold pattern is complete: natural, carnal, and spiritual. As the Genesis parable goes, Cain and Abel are born after the fall of Adam and Eve. This being true, Adam and Eve are no longer natural but carnal when their sons are conceived and born. Since the tree of knowledge reflects both good and evil, this is reflected in Cain and Abel, Cain being carnal while Abel spiritual. This duality aligns with the 2 thighs of brass and the corresponding judgment of flesh and spirit in the principle of sowing and reaping. What did Eve say? I have acquired a man from the Lord. When I first considered this years ago, it made no sense. But then I realized that this speaks of the natural man that is just as much a part of God's design as the spiritual man. So also the process leading from the first to the last. Now let's go to the following. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And the Lord respected Abel and his offering, but he did not respect Cain and his offering. Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. Here, Cain and Abel bring offerings to the Lord. Cain's consisting of the fruit of the ground, and Abel's of the firstborn of his flock. What is the main difference between the two? Cain's is bloodless, while Abel's isn't. Abel's reflects self-sacrifice. Cain's doesn't. Furthermore, Abel brings the firstborn of his flock, reflecting his love for his brother, who is the firstborn. Cain's offering is self-focused. Abel's is about others. What does Paul tell us? The carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, nor indeed can be. Despite this truth, the carnal mind can be very religious, such as Cain, fruit of the ground, symbolic of those religious works steeped in pride. Did Jesus have this in mind when he spoke the following regarding the scribes and the Pharisees? But all their works they do to be seen by men. They make their phylacteries broad and enlarge the borders of their garments. They love the best places at feast, the best seats in the synagogues, greetings in the marketplaces, and to be called by men, Rabbi, Rabbi. But you do not be called Rabbi, for one is your teacher, the Christ, and you are all brethren. Do not call anyone on earth your father, for one is your Father, he who is in heaven. Do not be called teachers, for one is your teacher, the Christ. But he who is greatest among you shall be your servant. And whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. How did Jesus say it? All their works they do to be seen by men. Whoever exalts himself. That's not a love for the self. What is? God rejects Cain's offering because it is self-centered. So Cain kills his brother. This brings us to the following. For this is the message that you heard from the beginning, that we should love one another, not as Cain, who was of the wicked one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his works were evil and his brother's righteous. Friend, ask yourself, who is the wicked one in this passage? 1 John 3:8 and 10 identified as the devil. I know what tradition teaches, but might the wicked one refer to the essence of carnality that works in all of us? After all, it was Cain who reaped the consequences of his actions. Might this tell us something? Strong's defines devil as a traducer. To traduce means to speak maliciously and falsely of someone or something, to slander or defame. This, I believe, is the main characteristic of pride. Before I close, let's go to the following. Then to Adam he said, because you have heeded the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Cursed is the ground for your sake. What did Cain bring as an offering to the Lord? The fruit of that which is cursed. Hence the reason God rejected it, not out of anger, but for Cain's sake. God rejects our offering. It is for our benefit, not his. Of such is sowing and reaping. What is God's solution to that which is cursed? You shall eat of it all the days of your life. No wonder Jesus said we must lose our life for his sake. Psalm 119:21, you rebuke the proud, the cursed, who stray from your commandments. For his commandments, see Matthew 22, verses 35 through 40.